Great men of history are often divisive. Only when the dust settles, and the sun sets on their monumental cairns, are great men universally remembered as heroes or villains. But as their lives unfold, and they take action and lead others, and do what must be done according to their guiding principles, great men create many allies, and equally as many enemies. In the land of Skyrim upon the continent of Tamriel, in the darkening days of the Fourth Era, one such man stood above the rest in this very regard. This man was Ulfric Stormcloak. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Exploring Fiction. From war hero to warmonger, the life of the Jarl of Windhelm was tumultuous and volatile, but not without reason. Ulfric suffered victory, defeat, and betrayal after countless betrayal. Across all the warring factions of the age, he seemed to hold tightest to that which he valued most. Ulfric paid dearly, and was thus pushed to more desperate means to see the dawn of a new, free Skyrim with every passing day. Some considered his actions heroic, while others saw him as a traitor. As the events and choices presented in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim allow the Last Dragonborn to determine their own view on the stalwart Jarl, Ulric's characterization is quite complex and full of nuance. So, who exactly is Ulfric Stormcloak? Is he a hero, a traitor, or something different altogether? Let's explore. Ulfric Stormcloak was born to Jarl Stormcloak of Windhelm and his wife, though his exact year of birth was undisclosed. However, in 4th Era 161, while he was still quite young, Ulfric was chosen to become a greybeard by the mystic monks themselves. Ascending the harrowing heights of the Throat of the World, Ulfric studied for a decade at High Hrothgar. Here he developed his Thum, the voice of the Nords, under the tutelage of Arngir. The boy possessed a promising, if not rather mundane, future indeed. Yet the Greybeards, within their frozen, secluded fortress, were far removed from the happenings of Skyrim proper. With the inception of the Great War in 4th Era 171, Ulfric witnessed this for himself. The muted monks were well-intentioned, but their physical distance, along with their intensive studies, dulled the conflict of the world below. Ulfric, contrastingly, was still young and full of the hardy Nord spirit. He yearned to fight for his kingdom and his people, and so abandoned his prestigious position as an acolyte of the Greybeards to serve in the Great War. Some regret existed within him, as he greatly respected the Greybeards and their ways, but his new calling was undeniable. Ulfric rarely employed his newly honed abilities in the voice, as he believed them dangerous and worth using only sparingly. Still, the man believed the Greybeards resentful of their decision to train him, especially after his usage of the Thum upon the field of battle. The Great War raged relentlessly across Tamriel in the late 4th Era. On one side stood staunchly the Aldmeri Dominion, the collection of high elves and their subjects spurred on by the Thalmor. Opposing them was the Empire, championed of course by the Imperials of Cyrodiil, but also their vassals, which included the Nords of Skyrim. Ulfric Stormcloak was a loyal soldier, one amongst many, until he was captured early in the conflict. According to Thalmor records, Ulfric was taken prisoner by the political faction directly, interrogated and tortured by Elenwen herself in the heart of the foul elven dungeons. The future Jarl prided himself on his devotion to his cause and his ability not to yield under pressure, or torture, but every man can be pushed to the brink. Ultimately, Ulfric confessed, revealing his identity along with certain scraps of information. Though he was eventually allowed to escape, Ulfric learned of the fall of the Imperial City to the Dominion, and was convinced by the Thalmor that the information he had provided was essential for its seizure. Ulfric Stormcloak had not only betrayed himself and his honor, but now his empire, the very collection of kingdoms for which he so heartily fought. Though it is unclear, and even possibly unlikely, that the details pried from his lips in agonized confession were even related or responsible for the capture of the White Gold Tower, it mattered little then. Ulfric believed it so, and so it was. In 4th Era 175, the bloody conflict between man and elf was concluded, the flow of death staunched with the signing of the White Gold Concordat. Though this treaty halted the fighting, many across the Empire believed it to be more akin to surrender. One rule in the Concordat, that which most greatly pertains to the life of Ulfric Stormcloak, was the banning of Talos worship across the Empire. Talos was a god of men and from men, and such heresy the Thalmor could permit under no circumstances. Ulfric, himself a proud man descended from proud men, felt the first gut-wrenching twists of betrayal at the hands of the Empire for accepting this clause. Still, he continued to serve in the soldierly ranks when his name was called. Prior to the White Gold Concordat, in 4th Era 174, the Reachmen leveraged the chaos of the Great War into reclaiming their own homeland. The Kingdom of the Reach was formed, a land of savage tradition and barbaric practice, and as dusk arrived for the Great War, the Reachmen yearned to be recognized as an independent people. However, the people of Skyrim still viewed Markarth as Nord territory, and the leader of the hold, Jarl Hrolfdir, enlisted Ulfric Stormcloak to quell the Reachmen. Ulfric acquiesced, but only under the condition that he and his men would be free to practice Talos worship once more. Hrolfdir agreed, hoping in secret that the shrewd High Elf politicians would remain blind to the proposition. Still, some now viewed Ulfric as a liability to the Empire, as his name had begun to surface in Thalmor dossiers. But the Thu'um-trained warrior of Windhelm marched west, intent on regaining the religious freedom stolen by the bending knee of a weak and brittle empire. At the forefront of his embittered militia, Ulfric Stormcloak led the campaign to retake Markarth in an event soon to be known as the Markarth Incident. Those present during the assault claimed horrific war crimes were committed, and that Ulfric once again summoned his arcane voice to overcome his savage adversaries. Ultimately, he slew the forsworn leader of the Reachmen, King Modonach, and drove his people back to the hills from whence they came. As promised, the native of Windhelm delivered the city back into the hands of the Empire, and as promised, Hrolfdir permitted Talos worship for Ulfric and his men. However, to the Jarl's disappointment and disdain, the Thalmor received word of this breach of the White Gold Concordat, and sent a contingent of their own party to demand Ulfric's arrest. Faced with heightened external pressure, Hrolfdir slighted Ulfric and forced him into custody, breaching his agreement and appeasing the Thalmor. Ulfric believed the Emperor himself behind the arrest, and became increasingly hostile towards his captors, who still named him Asset. Ulfric was set to rotting in the Thalmor dungeons, and there he remained even upon the death of his father in 4th Era 183. Jarl Hoag Stormcloak of Windhelm had passed from the land of the living, and the presence of his son at his funeral was robbed him over a betrayal and lack of justice on the part of the Empire. Famously, Ulfric delivered his father's eulogy via letter smuggled out of his cell, only further adding to the sense of injustice boiling within him. Finally, Ulfric was set free, and he labored back to Windhelm to take up the seat of his father, claiming the title of Jarl of the Eastmarch. But the black spots of dissent had darkened Ulfric's heart then, almost beyond repair. From his seat of authority, he conducted the first skirmishes of the Stormcloak Rebellion, minuscule conflicts hardly large enough to draw imperial attention. But when High King Islad of Skyrim met his unceremonious end, an opportunity arose. Islad's son Torrig was proclaimed the new High King, but Ulfric believed the boy unworthy and inexperienced, a puppet of the Empire. At the Great Moot, Ulfric voiced his opinions on the Empire, even suggesting secession. Known little to the Jarl of Windhelm, Torrig greatly respected Ulfric, both from the man's past deeds and his present ideals. But the notion of independence was for the present pushed aside, and Skyrim continued its existence under the boot of the Cyrodiilic Empire. Ulfric's burgeoning rebellion grew in popularity and commonality, and soon the Bear of Markarth became as equally renowned as the young High King himself. Years after the inception of his rebellion, Ulfric rode directly to Solitude, reining in his steed outside the Blue Palace itself. Torrig, of course, still greatly respecting the Jarl, welcomed Ulfric through the gates. The High King believed they would together discuss tactics and feasible options for Nord annexation, but this was no amiable rendezvous. Instead, Ulfric invoked the ancient rights of their shared people. He challenged High King Torrig to a duel, a proposition which the monarch could only refuse at risk of losing his throne. However, if he accepted, it was his life he jeopardized. To Torrig, and to Skyrim, there was no choice. The king agreed. Though once again eyewitness testimonies carry a share of variability and doubt, Ulfric himself recounted that he used the Thu'um to cast Torrig down, and then drove his sword through the king in a killing blow. Word spread quickly of the young monarch's defeat. Some were quick to name Ulfric hero for deposing a weak puppet ruler. Others condemned him as a murderer for calling upon unjust and outdated means to achieve his desired end. Nevertheless, Ulfric publicly lauded his victory, claiming it proof that the Empire was crumbling, especially in Skyrim. The Nords, he assured, would be stronger without their southern superiors. Slinking back through the Gates of Solitude, Ulfric returned free and unhindered to Windhelm, and from his seat seized full control of his rebellion. Skyrim itself fractured from the weight of his cause, and the Jarls declared themselves for the Stormcloaks or for the Empire. Ulfric ruled Windhelm with clear favor toward his native Nord people, and his movement was mostly rooted in their shared heritage and tradition. But in 4th Era 201, the Jarl's good fortune evaded him. Only months after the death of Torrig, Ulfric and his fellow Stormcloaks were ambushed and seized on their way to Darkwater Crossing, captured by the Empire's primary emissary, General Tullius. Forced to surrender, Ulfric and his band were gagged and dragged to Helgen to await execution. Ulfric's crime, of course, was the greatest of all. But another prisoner there was in the horse-drawn cart that day, the Last Dragonborn, and the return of Alduin to the present day allowed Ulfric to escape in the chaos. He was once again free to carry on his rebellion, much to the joy of the Thalmor, who yearned to see Skyrim divided. While the exact future of Ulfric Stormcloak is unclear, a few potential futures exist. Some say he is slain by the Last Dragonborn, some that he is joined by the great hero, and some spread rumor that he agrees to a preliminary armistice, foregoing immediate action and consequence to end the great Skyrim civil war. Ulfric Stormcloak is the purest image of a native Nord, as any who may look upon him can attest. Bearded, clothed in the pelts of great bears and other beasts, and waving his vibrant blue-silver banner at his back, he is proud of his heritage and loyal to the blood flowing through his hardy veins. However, his past is dying before his eyes, and that which replaces it is not so embracing of the cause of the Nord people. Skyrim has become a vassal state of the Cyrodiilic Empire, granted the protection of their superiors, but also forced into their conflicts. Opposing the Empire is the Thalmor, the political party of the Aldmeri Dominion, with a particular loathing of the spawn of Lorkhan. The Nords of Skyrim are nestled snugly between this opposing pair, and if there is such an eye of the storm, Ulfric Stormcloak sits at its center. In the waning days of the 4th Era, Ulfric is an influential figure, but he is a man formed of betrayal. He served in the Great War, but is rewarded only with the ban of his religion as the Empire signs and accepts an unflattering treaty. He annexed Markarth from the reign of the Forsworn and resecured the city's place in Skyrim proper, but is abandoned by his benefactor and hauled away in chains by the Thalmor. He called for a free kingdom and challenged an unworthy king for the right to lead his people, and is only further entrenched in a civil war that benefits his enemies more than himself. Of course, Ulfric is no god, no infallible figure of mythic proportion. He has sinned as much as any other man. In his initial bout of Thalmor captivity, he is tortured severely enough to crack his stoic interior, relaying information he is led to believe crucial in the fall of the White Gold Tower. It is Ulfric who initiates the Skyrim Civil War, sundering the kingdom of the Reachmen and felling his own High King. Torrig, little more than a boy, idolized the Jarl of Windhelm, but Ulfric only saw a pretender standing in the way of his noble goals. These mistakes all haunt Ulfric's past and shape his future, but to many, his cause is just. No septums live to sit the southern throne. The Empire is now the dominion of former warlords. Other provinces have successfully broken away, though Skyrim remains. But this is a diminished Skyrim, a humiliated Skyrim. The secessions of the White Gold Concordat result in the loss of the right to worship the God of Men. To Ulfric Stormcloak, the affront is too great. While the Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion are an ever-present external threat, he instead looks inward at the Empire. This very same Empire tossed Ulfric aside and named him scapegoat in several instances to save their own skins, and so he sees little reason to remain loyal. At every turn, the Empire abandoned him or placed the blame upon his shoulders. Ulfric is a man pushed to more drastic means by the inaction or contradictory action of those who govern above his station. Though thought callous and caring only of his own people by some, Ulfric Stormcloak and his cause can be clearly traced to the failings of the Empire. He is a war hero and man of the people manipulated on all sides, and the Stormcloak faction is Ulfric's answer to the call of a free and strong Skyrim. Difficult it would be to name a more polarizing figure in the recent history of Skyrim than Ulfric Stormcloak. Born and raised for a noble, quiet life, he listened to the calling of his heart to serve instead upon the battlefield. He was rewarded with renown, but also personal and collective loss. Ulfric's mighty deeds placed him in high esteem in Skyrim, but also amplified his voice as a dissenter against the Empire. The sins of the Cyrodiils were becoming irredeemable in the eyes of the Nords, and Ulfric was a mouthpiece for their frustrations. But the means to achieve the ends he desired were no trivial tasks. Every major crossroads in his life came about by the seeming failure of his allies or coercing of his enemies. Ulfric committed many wrongs of his own, bringing into question all that he fought to build. His life was shaped by abandonment and manipulation, driving him to great desperation by the age of the Last Dragonborn. While the result of his crusade has yet to be determined, it was undeniable that Ulfric Stormcloak was a product of betrayal. So, that's all for this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new here, I'd love to have you. Visit my website russellawellsauthor.com for exclusive reviews, fiction, and more, and sign up for my mailing list for free exclusive content. The links for both are in the description below. And, like always, I will see you next time.